felt like the nation wanted me to perform in this bike race. And now I knew I was about to blow it out of the water because I was flying. And I walked on the track, obviously I did a PB, whatever, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, you're talking to us as the most successful British female Olympian of all time.
I literally would miss parties, proms, you name it, I missed it. I didn't celebrate anything because my ultimate goal was to go and win gold medals. And I remember before the 500 metre, my favourite event, I should be going into that confident as anything. I was in the toilet being sick because I just couldn't deal with how nervous I was. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I just do not want to do this. And I feel like the interview with the BBC, without saying, why can't I just have another baby? Yeah. But that's basically what I was obviously getting at.
Hey, just a really quick note to say thank you so much to all of our new subscribers. And if you haven't yet subscribed, why not? It means you're the first to know about brand new episodes of High Performance, and it also means we can attract incredible new guests to the show. So please hit subscribe right now. Enjoy the show.
This episode is supported by Huel.
Well, Laura, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. How are you feeling?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Good. So what is high performance to you?
So high performance, right, the first thing that comes to mind is a sports car. And let me just unpick that because it sounds really random, doesn't it? Right, but what is a sports car? It's pretty uncomfortable. It's normally only has 2 seats because it's built solely for one purpose, to go really fast. And that to me is an athlete's mindset and the mentality of someone who wants to perform at their best.
So the first thing you say about that sports car is that it's pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Okay.
How uncomfortable is the life of an elite sports person?
I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world. I have loved literally every minute of it. But there are so many ups and downs that you go through. And everyone always says to me, oh, do you want your kids to be involved in sport? Now, don't get me wrong. Everything that cycling has ever given me has been brilliant. But I also know how tough it is. And at those bad times, when all the pressure's on you, do I want that for my child? Because it can be so unbelievably intense at times.
Take us to one of them then.
Okay, well, so 2012 for me, easy, because young kid, no one really cared about me. 2016, whole different ball game. And just getting on the start line, the team pursuit, when you're with your pals, I'm just chilled, you know, everyone's got their job, everyone's got a role, it's fine. Get me on the track on my own, and it's all on me. All the pressure is on me. And it wasn't even just, you know, the pressure I was putting on myself. I felt like the nation wanted me to perform in this bike race. And I remember before the 500 metre, my favourite event, I should be going into that confident as anything. I was in the toilet being sick because I just couldn't deal with how nervous I was. And I just think, I can't imagine putting that on my child. And ultimately they could have that, you know. And when I look back, I do think, wow, to come out the other side of that, it takes a certain kind of mentality to be able to get on the start line and perform like that. But yeah, it was just incredibly intense.
So can we talk about that mentality then? Because I was struck by the fact that your dad had said to you weren't born with that. That wasn't a quality that he could see from the earliest of age. So it was something that you obviously developed, that ability to be comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're not born with it. I think there is a part of me, definitely natural talent is a thing. I totally believe in that. But I believe in that more from a makeup, from a body and what you're born with, you know, your structure as such. So I am very unique in the fact that I'm an endurance rider that's got fast twitch fibres. I was born like that, definitely. But I think everything else that comes with your mentality and the way you think about things and the way that you're able to process things, I think I learnt characteristics, whether that be from people around you. Like my mum, she lost loads of weight. She literally lost 8.5 stone in a year and a half. I had that person to idolise throughout my entire career. And whether it was her that taught me that without actually teaching me that, I don't know. But I do think that your mind behaviours I'll definitely learn.
So can you tell us some of the ones that when you look back on your career, you go, they were essential. They were behaviours and mindsets that really made a difference?
So I think I was lucky enough to go to Delhi Commonwealth Games. And I think when I went to Delhi, I was young. I was 18. It was my first games as such, obviously not an Olympics, but it had an athletes village. I was away from home. I was with people that I'd literally never met because it was the first time I'd actually competed for obviously England at the time, but it was the girls that were trying to get a spot on the Great Britain cycling team to go to the Olympics. And it was terrifying. It was literally terrifying. You walk into a food hall and you're just like thrown to the walls. It's like, free bar, have what you want. Like literally walk in and go get your food. And as an 18-year-old, you look around like, wow, like this is totally overwhelming. But I was so structured and so to the point. I remember going in there and being like, I'm just having pasta and I'm just having chicken because that is what I would have at home. And I think because I was like that and because I had the mindset of I need to do everything that's right for my performance, that to me was really the starting point of a career that kind of, I guess, took off from that point.
Didn't you celebrate your 21st a few years early?
Well, I didn't really celebrate my 21st, to be totally honest, because, I mean, I just sort of, all my birthdays got ravelled into one when I was 16.
So explain that.
Because obviously, when you're an athlete, you're so selfish. You're so selfish. I cannot even tell you. I literally would miss parties, proms, you name it. I missed it. I didn't celebrate anything because my ultimate goal was to go and win gold medals. And you can't do that if you're out partying at weekends and everything is always about the next session. Like if I miss one, someone else is doing that session. And I'm not. So they're definitely going to be ahead of me. And that's how my mind works. And so when I was, 21, all of them, to be honest, even my 30th, I didn't celebrate my 30th because why would I? Because I'm training and birthdays can be celebrated. I'll celebrate my 50th and 60th because I won't be riding then. But at this moment in time, everything is about winning gold medals.
But that's such a rare ability for a young, to be 16 and to go, right, I'm going to celebrate my 16th and my 18th and my 21st and my 25th and my 30th because the rest of my life's going to be dedicated to cycling. That's rare because it's so mature. So do you remember when you, let's say, stopped thinking like a kid and started thinking like an athlete?
No, I think my mum and dad always keep me really grounded, like throughout life, like they have done. I always go back to them. I'm constantly on the phone to them. And I think, having them there and being like that and kind of bringing me back down to earth, I guess, after the important races has kind of really helped. I think when I was 18 and I won the first World Championships, I think when you're in the athlete's world, you're already more mature than your normal 13, 14-year-old. I started to go on camps when I was 12. And so you're already in a world where your mum and dad aren't there anymore. Lots of people would have done like one overnight at school, but they'd never have done a week, 2-week camp, which we were obviously taken on. And so you're already like a step ahead, I would say. But when I was 18, we won the World Championships in the team pursuit. And obviously that was 18 months out before the Olympics. And then I got thrown into living in Belgium for 6 weeks, totally on my own, didn't speak the language. Luckily, my sister was living over there, so I could go and live with my sister. And that was the first point that I was like, wow, like this is going to be tough, and I'm totally on my own. But that was the first moment where I was like, oh, this is me steering my career now. Like this is very much me in control of this. And it was young, like 18 is definitely young. I mean, so many things happened that I look back on, I'm like, wow, I'm actually carnage. Like I set fire to a jacket potato, for example, because I'd never cooked. Because why would you? Like my mum literally did everything for me at home. I turned up with a dirty skin suit at the first training session because I didn't wash it from the session before. Because why would I? Normally I leave it outside and my mum would wash it. And so it was just like a massive learning curve. But I would say, it was probably 18 where I was like, wow, I need to grow up and I need to grow up fast.
Huel has been a staple of my diet for some time, and I'm currently loving these Huel Daily A to Z vitamins. Tastes great, refreshing. Each can has 26 vitamins and minerals, offering 154 science-backed health benefits. Reduced tiredness and fatigue, normal cognitive function, healthy skin, hair and nails, and vitamin D for immunity. This is a vitamin drink that offers everything you could need it to. So what are you waiting for? Grab it right now in Tesco stores nationwide or at huel.com and let me know what you think.
So can I ask you, because there's one incident I read about in your book where you said you were chasing points. I don't know what age you were.
Yeah.
And you were at Cardiff and you said you collapsed in the final straight.
Yeah.
And your dad took you to a cafe And what I'm interested in is you described the consequence of that chat that your dad had with you, that you saw what had happened as, in your words, a speed bump and not a roadblock.
Yeah.
What did he say that helped you be able to deal with those setbacks?
So any setback that we had was very much, well, what happened? Like, why did you do that? And what can we change for next time? And I mean, I can remember that one because it was an elimination race, which is funny because at the time it wasn't in the Olympics and then it ended up in the Olympics. So all these bad experiences actually really helped by the time I got to the Olympics. But with that, I sat up too early and then I ended up coming out. And then that was me done. I was out of the Omnium then because obviously you have one bad race. And I actually listened to someone else telling me I was out when I actually wasn't. And annoyingly, I sat up, but that's game over by that point, right? And I obviously never did that again. Like you'd keep going until someone starts shouting at you to get out of the way. And it was just a learning curve. But had he come at me and been like, why did you do that? Which I've seen so many times with parents who are too pushy. If he'd come at me and started shouting, it would have just given me a negative, I would just felt negatively about it. And then the next time I'd been terrified to do it again. Whereas I actually went in thinking, well, I won't do that again. I'll try this. And I think having that clarity going into a bike race, knowing what you're going to do is key to success.
It sounds like you were so well set up, right, by your upbringing and the way your parents operated and by, as you say, being born with natural gifts, right, but then making the most of them in your own mindset. Yeah. But then when you step into the professional setup of British cycling, I imagine it is a whole other level. Now, people have been obsessed for years, right, about how British cycling has become so dominant, so powerful, so successful over such a long period. What would you love us to hear about that world that maybe we don't already know?
I honestly just loved every minute of it. Like, to this day, I can sit back and I look so fondly on, especially the Dave B era, the Sir Dave Brailsford era, just the way he managed to get people to rally around us as athletes and get everyone working to the same goal, whether or not it was you that was standing on the podium or not. Like, he could get physios, mechanics, coaches, everyone working together for one ultimate goal, which was to win medals. But these people weren't standing on the podium, we were. And so to be able to do that, I just felt was just incredible.
So how did he do it?
He just had a way with words. Like, he just, you see these conferences where you get your your football manager and he sits in there and he's dead. Like, I've just watched the Pep Guardiola Man City thing, and he sits in there and he's dead, like, shouty. Dave isn't like that. He's very much, this is how we're going to do it. This is how it's going to happen. And then you're going to go on to win. And just the way he's like sells it to you, you come out of the meeting and you're like, yes, I am. And I feel like everyone feels like that. Like, you come out just feeling like elevated. And then he continues that. And he was always really approachable. Anyone could go and meet with Dave. You just had to knock on his door and he would literally speak to an academy rider, to a podium rider, to a mechanic, to a physio, because he wanted everyone to buy into his plan. And so his door was always open. And I think that was kind of key to that, the fact that it wasn't like a shut door, I'm the boss. It was very much, he was approachable and he just had this way with words that made you feel brilliant.
What about the days though where you fell short or you didn't deliver to the expected standard or those around you didn't? How did he deal with that?
We had a really good relationship with our coaches, and then Dave also had a really good relationship with our coaches. So I think instead of Dave coming in, because it would feel scary, I think, if, the PD comes along and it's like, that wasn't good enough today. Like, you'd be like, whoa. And he was never like that. He would get your coach to sit you down and you'd have a meeting just one-to-one with your coach. And so I think he had a nice formula of working out who would be best to speak to us as athletes. He would also come and speak to us if he felt, we needed a kick up the backside.
Can you remember a time when he did that?
He never lost it with us as a group. I mean, I think he probably has lost it with people in the past, but us as women's endurance, we were always a little bit like a step ahead, especially pre-2012 era. We were always sort of performing. But I do remember him saying, you're not just given gold medals. And I remember sticking with it, and I remember thinking, he's right. Like, we do need to keep going and keep going, like, because we were at the top by that point, but we did also still have 18 months before the Olympics.
Because obviously arrogance can slip in then, complacency can crop up.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in any sort of standout bits of information or things that you remember from that time that people listening to this can really learn from and put it into their own lives. You know, the things that we talk about, the marginal gains, the attention to tiny detail, those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, see, the marginal gains, right? I think everyone thinks bikes and equipment that they're using, but it wasn't like that with Dave. It was the extra bits. It was sorting out, so I had something happen in my personal life, and I rang Dave, and I was just like, I just do not know what to do. And he was just an ear then. He wasn't going to change my circumstance, but he was an ear for me to speak to. And then he would go into every little detail, like the beds. He got us all new mattresses before the Olympics, and then those mattresses travelled with us to the Olympics. So we'd been sleeping on these mattresses for like 6 months because he believed that sleep and sleep disturbances going into the games would be a massive error, like that'd be a massive no-no. And so he went really into depth with that. But it would literally be anything. Like my car window got smashed and I'm like 19, like I don't know what to do. And he sorted it out for me. Like he rings someone to come and fix the window because it was causing me a stress and he didn't want athletes turning up in a stress. So the marginal gains, yes, was Secret Squirrel and all the fancy equipment, you know, he managed to rally that team together. But it was actually the extra things, I think, that made the real differences.
Nice.
So one of the things that Dave is on record as talking about is that he employed something that he called the king or the queen strategy.
Yeah.
That you were at the centre of everything and everybody was there to serve you.
Yeah.
But that depended on you as the monarch hitting the targets that they'd set for you.
Yeah. So we were the queens of our castles.
Yeah.
That's what he always used to say.
Yeah, and when I look back when you first got on the programme, there's that interesting story where you were kicked off it and you've made the phone call yourself to, was it Helen Mortimer?
Yeah.
To get yourself on it. So you were obviously used to speaking your mind and making demands.
Yeah.
How did you go about getting the buy-in of all those other people to help you get on the podium? So
the Helen Mortimer story, basically, I was too young to be put onto the endurance programme at the time. I was 15. I might have been 14 going on to be 15. No, I was 16. I'm lying because it was juniors. And it was just before juniors and I was trying to get onto the junior programme, but I was too young, right? And so they said to me, look, we will allow you to go onto the sprint programme. And I'm like, okay. And because, you know, there's been some youngsters go through that. Rebecca James had gone through that. And so I was like, okay, you're not going to turn that opportunity down. Like for someone who is chasing Olympic dreams, you're not going to turn an opportunity from British cycling down. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And then long story short, it gets like 8 months in and I'm clearly not a sprinter. Like, yes, I've got fast twitch and yes, my starts were really fast, but that was all I had. Like if it got past the 500 metre, I was nothing. Like I just wasn't a sprinter. And so they kicked me off. And then they put me on the mountain bike programme. I've never ridden a mountain bike. Like the last mountain bike I rode, I was like 10, you know, riding up and down the bumps on the driveways. And so I was like, this really is not for me. And I don't know what made me just pick up the phone, but I knew Helen from talent team days. So I just picked the phone up. I remember being on the mountain bike camp and just ringing her and being like, you've got to give me a trial to get on the endurance programme. I am not a sprinter. I never have been. I didn't enjoy it. I'm now been released from that. How do I get on it? And then luckily for me, she did just put me on it. So I had like 2 weeks where I had to sort of prove myself.
Do you think she did that because this young 15-year-old had the bravery to ring her up and fight her corner?
And I think maybe partly that, but I also think history played a big part in it. Like before I went onto the endurance programme, I'd won national titles as like a 13, 14-year-old as an endurance rider. And so I think maybe, like the history of what I'd done before that had helped that. Because, I mean, there was lots of people that didn't agree because I didn't even test. Like, she literally just put me on the programme.
But what interests me, though, Laura, is that, like Jake just picked up on, you're 15 and having the courage to phone up an adult and make demands at that age, even though you've got that history, still takes some resolve. I'm interested in how you'd explain it now.
I don't know. I think sport gave me confidence. When I was in school, right, I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't say boo to a goose. My worst nightmare was reading like Much Ado About Nothing out loud, you know. You know how they go around one by one? And I'm like, oh, gosh, don't ask me. Please don't ask me. And it didn't give me confidence. But you get me out on the athletics track or in the playing field And all of a sudden, I became a light. Like, I loved it. I could shout at people. I could tell them what to do. And I don't know why it gave me that kind of confidence, but it never even crossed my mind not to ring her. I wanted something, and the only way that I was going to get it was by talking to the head of that. And like, I'm all for this cutting out middleman as well. Like, I've always had that, like, my whole career. I've always said, like, if I've got an injury or whatever, and why am I going to ring my coach to tell them that I've got an injury when I need to speak to the physio? Like, there's no point me ringing him to ring her when I can just do it. And I was always like that. Like with Dave B, with Shane, if I had an issue, then I rang them. Like, I never bothered with anyone else. And yeah, so I don't know. It never even crossed my mind not to ring her. I just rang her.
But there's interesting research on this. I think it's a research in Holland called Maria Elphick that has studied young prodigies like you that have got that really rich potential.
Yeah.
And asked who makes that transition like you did to becoming the most decorated Olympian. And one of the factors is early ownership. That you don't let anybody else decide your career path. You're the one that takes control of it.
Yeah.
So when you get into the Olympic programme and you're in there, you've got Paul Manning as your coach, haven't you?
Yeah.
How do you create a relationship where you have your say and go, this doesn't feel right, rather than just defer to them and assume that they know better?
The way me and Paul worked was definitely personality traits. Like, I am very say it how it is, and so's he. And I think it just clicked. Like, from the get-go, I never felt like I couldn't, like, literally there was no topic I couldn't speak to him about. And so that, I think, was unique in terms of, if I'd had someone else as a coach, I think it would have taken more, like, to get to know him, a bit more talking. I probably wouldn't have felt as confident to just go at him and say, no, I don't agree with this session. I think we need to move this here. Because that was definitely, our personalities were so similar that it just clicked from the get-go. Like, and there was never a point that I didn't trust Paul with my training plan. Like, there was very few things that I questioned with him. So I feel like that relationship was actually really quite unique.
Right.
You know what I think is interesting right here, Damian, is this idea of simplicity. You know, sometimes people want to really overcomplicate how you can be successful. You know, you're talking to us as the most successful British female Olympian of all time. But when you talk, it isn't like, oh my goodness, I would never have considered that. Oh wow, what a revelation. I'd never believe that would happen. Like, it's simple stuff. There's, like, in the nicest possible sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I actually totally agree. I always say my best tool, and the tool that I've used throughout my career, is talking. I think that's helped me just to be as successful as I am. I've never been scared to raise my hand and ask a stupid question or have an argument if I don't agree with something. I just think I've always been quite good at just talking, like being able to say it how it is. And I think that about so many things. Like, when I look back now, I remember that, like, we had a couple of arguments within the team, and Steve Peters had to get involved because obviously he was the psych at the time. And I remember just sitting there and holding my ground. Like, I was just like, no, like, this is what I agree with, and this is the point that I'm going to keep pushing. I can, yeah. I'm not sure I want to share it, to be honest. There was just, when you're part of a team, right? Especially in the team pursuit, you have lots of communication within the team pursuit. And some of the ways that people were communicating at the time was savage. Like, I didn't agree with the language that was being used. Yeah. When you are literally in the team pursuit line, because you can shout what you want, really, but we always use, like, hold, squeeze, or change if you think someone needs to get out of the way. But it started to get a little bit, like, abusive, really. Like, and there was lots of like, it was getting intense because people were wanting to be selected for the bike races, right? So there were a couple of times where people would be doing things to, like, screw someone else over. And I sat back, and I didn't take being, like, team leader as such. I never felt like that. But there were times that I felt I had to step in because the language that was being used wasn't in a team that I wanted to be part of. I didn't agree with that. And so I remember just coming off the track and just being like, no, we are not talking like that. Like, we're a team going for gold medals. We are not talking like that. I'm sorry, I'm not having swearing. And I swear quite a lot. But when it comes to a bike race, I'm not having people getting shouted rude names. It's not happening. And Steve got brought down. And I remember just sitting there and being like, I'm not going back on the track until I get an apology. Like, I'm not being spoken to like that. And I mean, I'm talking pre-2012. I'm 20, you know? We did eventually apologise to each other. And then when we went up on the track, we were obviously going really fast again.
Because it reminds me of a line that in the book that you co-authored with Jason.
Yeah.
It's credited to him, his section.
Yeah.
He says that you and him needed to learn to argue better in your own relationship, and it sounds like that has a personal and a professional impact. How do you learn to make your point or argue more effectively?
I mean, for me, it's funny because when I say I talk a lot, when it comes to an argument with Jace, because I know it winds him up, I just stop talking. I'm just like, no, I'm not biting. Like, I'm just not talking. And it would go on for like a day, you know, and we wouldn't have spoken because he'll argue. He'll be wanting to argue. And I'm like, no, I'm not arguing because I know that it winds him up, like to no end, seriously. But it got to a point where it wasn't really productive. And so we got to the, we agreed that he wouldn't go mental and I would actually open up and I would actually say what the issue is. And yes, we're still arguing, but it wasn't like one person just getting their point across and the other one just ignoring them. We had to get to a point where, you know, we had to kind of meet in the middle on how we wanted to resolve our issues.
Can we talk about a relationship between two elite athletes?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the fact that we both laugh at that point probably tells a lot, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You wouldn't think it would work because as an athlete, you're so selfish. Like, it's unbelievable. But Jason and I, well, I mean, you've done this with him. We couldn't be more yin and yang if we tried. I don't shut up. He barely says a word. But that just works. It works in our house. But there was so many things that we agreed on when it came to, well, high performance, but so many ways of life that we felt we had to live to perform at that level. We would do very little at weekends. We would say no to anything really, like any parties, birthdays, get-togethers, whatever. We were both on par with saying no to. We both enjoy the kind of simple life, or did do, because our life now is absolute carnage. But at the time, we really enjoyed just doing nothing because the only thing that really mattered, yes, we cared for each other, but the only thing that really mattered was winning gold medals. And the biggest thing for us, and it was actually Jace that kind of set the rules, I suppose, set the standard. He said to me, when we go into the velodrome, we're professionals and actually we're colleagues. And then everything outside is, you know, when we're a relationship. And it stuck with me because I would never have thought of it like that. I'd have just been like, you know, not acting like you do at home, but just I would have been a bit more friendly with him. But it was very much the minute we got into track centre, he was with his team and I was with mine. And yeah, right, there might be the odd if I'd been upset or he'd been upset or he crashed once. He had a really bad crash once and you can't help but get up because obviously you care for that person. But all the other times, we were so professional. And I think if you went into the velodrome and asked anyone that worked with us, like they would agree.
But there is a wider context, isn't there, that you'd also come in British cycling. There was the Victoria Pendleton relationship with one of the coaching staff or support staff.
Yeah.
So how did you go about communicating what you and Jason had decided so everybody else understood where the boundaries lay?
Yeah, I mean, I think that got a bit confusing and a bit, like there was a bit of a conflict in terms of, I think Vicky maybe took it to heart a little bit that we were allowed, it looked like we were allowed to have a relationship. But we do sign a contract that said you can't have a relationship with a staff member. Now, Jace obviously wasn't a staff member. So it was allowed, like you can't stop two athletes obviously falling in love with each other. And so it was always allowed. I can't really remember like having the initial conversation of when we got together, but I do remember pre-2012 when we went on our holding camp and Shane actually said to us, I think it's like in your best interest to keep this kind of under wraps until after the Olympics. And at the time I remember being like, well, why? Like no one cares. But obviously they didn't care before and they probably wouldn't have done. But the aftermath of it, if we'd had that prior to the Olympics, it would have been the biggest distraction. And I think it was the best advice that we were given was actually don't let the media know.
I mean, you can see it now. I hosted the track cycling, right, for the BBC up high with Mark Cavendish.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking from my perspective, if I'd have known that you two were a couple at that time, it would have been the conversation.
Of course.
You know, you're cheering him on, he's cheering you on. What's the dynamic in the team? You know, the papers would have done all the headlines about, you know, gold medal partnerships and whatever, wouldn't they? Yeah.
And it would have been eyes on us even before we'd competed. And because I actually remember I didn't even really watch Jason's races because I was a little bit nervous, you know, of it becoming apparent. And I just remember seeing every now and again, I'd look up at the scoreboard and be like, okay, he's still in the sprint. And he would do the same when we were seeing the Omnium. But it wasn't until afterwards, he came in for the Omnium. And then that's when people were like, hang on, like, why has he come in? And then obviously afterwards, it didn't really matter. And I stuck it on Twitter and that was that. It was out there.
Hey guys, do you want £350 off the latest generation 8 Sleep Pod 4 Ultra? It's a pod added to your existing mattress, proven to give you up to 1 hour more quality sleep every night. It's used by sports people, it's used by titans of industry, it's even used by me. And there's nothing else like it on the market. It heats, it cools, it adjusts, and it uses sensors to track your sleep with 99% tracking accuracy. Sleeping on the pod for just 1 week can improve your cardiovascular health as much as 12 weeks of strength training. So to get £350 off the latest generation 8 Sleep Pod 4 Ultra, just go to 8sleep.com/HPP. That's 8sleep.com/HPP.
So can I ask you about competition itself? Because there's always like an element of the devil around you when I was watching you compete. You know, like you were quite calculating, weren't you, that mind games were a big part of what you were doing, especially in the Omnium.
Yeah. I mean, mind games were a massive part of it. Yeah. I actually remember in Rio, this was like the one like mind game that kind of sticks in my head. There was 2 things that happened in that year. So it was the pre-Rio year. And mine and Sarah Hammer, I never felt like we were head to head. Like it never felt like that.
Who?
Sarah Hammer.
Yep.
The American girl.
The American,
yeah.
Maybe it looked like that from, everyone else's perspective, but we would talk in track centre and stuff, so it never felt like I was head to head with anyone. But there was like a real change in what her coach was doing and what he was saying. I don't know whether maybe she did then see me as more of a threat because obviously I'd won in 2012. I don't know. But I remember it was in one of the last qualifying events before the Olympics, and the pursuit was part of the Omnium at the time. And obviously in the pursuit, you start either side of the track, don't you, right? And it goes in the rank that you are in the Omnium. So me and Sarah were first and second. I think she was beating me at the time. And we set off for the pursuit. Now, every time I came past, her coach would shout, "Come on, Sarah." And obviously it made me feel like, hang on a minute, what, is she catching me? And he would do it every single lap. And I came off and I was like, and she did beat me, but she beat me by like half a second. She didn't beat me enough to even nearly catch me. And I remember coming off and saying to Paul, my coach, like, what the heck? Like, why would he do that? I don't understand. And he was like, because it's mind games. And I remember thinking, wow, like for a coach to do that, it's not even an athlete saying something, her coach, which I should maybe add at the time was a husband.
Right.
I was like, wow, like that is intense, really. But I'm glad he did it because then when we got to Rio, we had these big fancy new gears, right? And so my chainring at the front was huge. And I'm walking up onto the track in one of the training sessions, the last training session. I'm about to go up and do a flying lap. And now I knew I was about to blow it out of the water because I was flying. And he goes to me, "That's a big chainring for a little girl." And I was like, whoa, that is savage. But I walked up and I just said, yes, it is. Because he'd already done his mind games. I was so prepared for stuff to leave his mouth that I was like, you literally don't scare me anymore. If he'd left it, if he hadn't done that in the qualifying event,
Right.
I'd have been like, why has he said that to me? And I probably walked on like, yeah, it is. I'm sorry. But actually I was so confident and I was just like, you literally don't scare me. You played your mind games. I know what you're doing. And I walked on the track. Obviously I did a PB, whatever, and it didn't matter. But that's the real, I just remember thinking, wow, like people will stoop to a level.
But also, who plays mind games with someone who isn't a threat? You were a threat.
Oh,
He was worried about you. Therefore, he felt he had to do that.
yeah. And I mean, I do appreciate that. But, I don't know. That's never been in me. You know what I mean? I've never said to Paul, "Oh, just go whisper something into her ear for me." Like,
Did you ever play mind games?
No, I don't think so. I think we played mind games in terms of, we kept our bikes covered and stuff like that. And as much as it wasn't mind games that I was playing, it does make you walk into the velodrome with your head held a little bit higher because people are talking about your stuff and your equipment and what you're going to do. And so it is mind games. It wasn't mind games that I necessarily played. But then actually you say that when you're in a bike race, you can like look tired, and you can do things to make people think, oh, she's having a bad day, and then next minute like you're out sprinting them. So like there are little things that you can do.
Yeah, because I think you're underplaying your hand here, because when I remember watching you in these events, like there was no discernible pattern to what you'd do. Sometimes you'd stay at the back of the pack, sometimes you'd go and set the pace.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you had the ability to vary what you were doing must have created confusion and a little bit fear in your rivals.
I think it was good that I was able to race very differently in every race that I did. So even the scratch race, which is literally whoever crosses the finish line first wins, right? Basic as anything. But sometimes I would leave it really late. I'd come right from the back. Sometimes it would look like I'm boxed at the bottom, but I'm calm as anything because I know I can get out at any one point. And then, the elimination race. I mean, I raced that a million times over, and I did it 1,000 different ways every single time.
So when it comes to making decisions then, this is what I'd like to explore in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Would you pre-plan that tactic, or was it in the moment? So how would you go about making these smart, consistently correct decisions?
Right, the scratch race, I would have gone in with a fixed plan because it's coming down to a sprint pretty much. If I think it's not coming down to a sprint, I would do everything in my power to make it come to a sprint, like going up and down on the track, doing lots of like S movements, brings the group down, gets people to chase. I would try and force that. I would force that hand because I, as you know, a sprint endurance rider, would want that. So I tend to have a plan for the scratch. The elimination race, no, solely on how I feel. I would have put the same gear on every single race that I'd ever done. And then it's funny because in an elimination race, everyone always says to you, sit second wheel. Because if you sit second wheel, you can keep getting out. And obviously you're at the front of the pack and you can keep getting out. It is so difficult to have a perfect race sitting in the second wheel. Because if one thing goes wrong, you've got to come out the bottom and go round the whole 20-odd riders. And so it just clicked one day. So Paul had said to me, it was actually the London test event, and he said, right, sit second wheel and like just see what happened. And before that as well, I'd had some serious shockers. The one before that in Colombia, I was second out. I ended up with like 19 points, something stupid. So in London, I just realised that one, my legs were really hurting. And two, the easiest way for me was to just sit behind a rider and just keep going around them. And that was obviously the first time that people were like, hang on a minute, like, what the heck has she done? And I remember Chris Baldwin's commentary, and he was like, oh, she's doing it the hard way, oh, she's going to be out. And then it got to like 6 people left, and he was like, hang on a minute, I take this back. I think she knows what she's doing. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but it just seemed easier. I was choosing what in my head was the easier route. So sometimes it was, a majority of times for the elimination race, it was purely on how I was feeling going into it.
So much has gone into this career of yours, physically, mentally, emotionally. So how do you make the decision to walk away?
It was an easy decision, really, to be honest. My mindset really changed once Monty was here. Obviously, I was quite open with the issues that Jason and I had to conceive Monty. And once he came, I cannot tell you how low I felt for 18 months, like just with this desire to have another baby. And it consumed me. And it was the first time that I'd ever heard Jason, like mental health is thrown around too easy, like just saying people have mental health issues. It's that, like the wording of that is just thrown around too easy. But it was the first time that Jason said to me that he'd seen me change, like he'd seen my personality be like sad, upset, because I'm not like that. I'm like this, like I'm a bubbly person, you know? And it was the first time that he ever said anything about, you know, there being like a change in my personality. And it was because I was literally consumed by this.
Did you know that?
I think I knew I was getting, like, obsessed is probably the word I would use. Like the obsession to want another baby, like it was an obsession. And so I knew that my everyday was, well, am I going to be pregnant? Like, am I ever going to be pregnant ever again? Like, and that was in my brain every single day. So I was very aware of that. I don't think I was aware of how much, pressure's probably the wrong word, but how much I really was relying on Jason for happiness, if you know what I mean. Like I spent so much of being like, oh, well, Jason will make it better. Like Jason will decide what we're doing today. And I don't think I realised until afterwards how much kind of pressure I was putting on him for that.
And can I ask, like, Is this after the miscarriage as well?
Yeah.
So did you ever give yourself time to grieve that properly?
No, I think when we fell pregnant with Monty, that was the first, I remember crying, like, so obviously we had the positive test, and I remember being in the kitchen and I just burst out crying. And it wasn't, I was obviously so happy, like so ridiculously happy, but there was a part of me that just felt so sad for everything that I'd lost in the past. Because the miscarriage was one thing, the ectopic was just another level of scariness. And I think I never really processed that because all I ever wanted was another baby. So I think for me, it was, I almost didn't give myself time to process it because I went into the athlete mindset of saying, well, what can we do? How can we make that go away and how can we improve that? Like, you know what I mean? Because that's, as an athlete, that's what you do. And so I don't think it was until I fell pregnant that I really realised how sad I'd been and how upset those moments had actually made me.
How hard did it make still being a cyclist? Because I imagine the things that meant so much to you 6 months before probably meant an awful lot less when there's finally something bigger that you want.
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult. The Commonwealth Games was the toughest race that I'd ever been a part of. Also because you paint, so I went to the Europeans and then obviously I came out, I told the world, that was in the April. And in the August, or end of July, August, was the Commonwealth Games. And I just was painting this picture of someone who was ready and who really wanted to go, and they were on the London velodrome, so of course I wanted to be there. And I was painting this picture of just being the same Laura, the same happy person who's about to go to the bike race. I did all the press conferences, I did everything that I normally would do. But at home, I actually remember crying to my mum, just being like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I just do not want to do this. And the hardest thing about all of it was, as an athlete, you expect your body to perform. And I'm very much in control of that. And when I step on the bike, I know what training sessions have gone into that. I know how I'm going to feel. Chances are I know roughly how well I'm going to do. Yeah, okay, there are some circumstances I might crash, whatever. But I know roughly how I'm going to feel on the bike. Why was my body giving me all of that? I went on and won those Commonwealth Games. I went on and won that scratch race. Why was my body doing that? But it wasn't doing the one thing that I feel like a female body should be able to do. And so I had this really horrible like yin and yang. And then I came out and I did that interview. And I feel like the interview with the BBC where I just was like, I'm not okay. Like these sessions have been, the prep for this has been horrendous, without saying, why can't I just have another baby? But that's basically what I was obviously getting at in that interview. And it was just, it was a really horrible yin and yang mindset that I had going on.
I'd never really considered this, that your entire life was built around a body you could trust and that did what you wanted when you wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly the one thing that you desperately want more than anything in the world, your body's not giving you that.
Just wouldn't do it. Yeah. And like, why? And everything else I would have answers for. If I have a bad training session, I've either slept badly or, the sessions prior to that have probably gone badly. My heart rate will be high. I had all the answers to all of that, but I had no answers for the thing that I just so desperately wanted it to do.
And what was the reaction to, that famous interview was moving. I'm interested in what was the collateral impact.
I don't think anyone truly understood, even within British cycling, I don't think anyone truly understood what I was going through. But I think at the Commonwealth Games, it was like a realisation that I'm actually a human being underneath this. And because the commentary, I use the commentary because it's brilliant for my retirement video. And the commentary's like, of course, Laura Kenny does it again. And I look at it and I just think it's mental. Like that's what people were relying on, they were relying on me to cross the line first. And it wasn't until I came out and I just said, you know what, I'm not okay. Like my mindset is all over the place. I feel under so much pressure to perform. And I have gone on to perform, but it's just because I've done that doesn't mean that I'm okay. And then after that, the head coach did ring me and he said, Laura, just take as much time as you need. Like we do not feel like you need to come into this building. And I think I took 2 months. It might have been a bit longer than that, I can't think now. And then I went back to it because I did, again, still feel lost because I didn't have my happy ending.
So for anyone in the audience hearing you talk about this and feels that empathy of that they feel lost or they just don't generally feel okay.
Yeah.
What have you learned from surviving that experience that you think would be helpful?
I mean, it was definitely, it's funny because I said, didn't I, right at the start, that my biggest tool is being able to speak. And it was the first time that I found myself not really opening up to people. And like, why is that? Like, why does it feel so difficult as a woman to say, I've had a miscarriage? But it does. Because is it failure? Because that's almost what it feels like. And I just felt I didn't have anyone to turn to, because you don't know who's been in that position. Who do you talk to about that? But I would say that once I did start speaking about it, that was my biggest tool. Like going to my mum and telling my mum. And then, I mean, when I look back, I'm like, for God's sake, mum, why didn't you just tell me? Because she too had a miscarriage. But it took me to go to her and say I had before she even told me that. And so I would say my biggest tool was actually opening up. Like, do not let it consume you like it did me, because it was horrible. Like, I felt so alone, and I would lie there at bed at night and I would be stuck on Google and Googling to just work out anything, just working out answers. But actually, once I did do that interview and say how sad I was and how it was consuming me, so many people got in contact, and all of a sudden I didn't feel alone. I actually felt really normal, and I wasn't a failure because it's happened to so many people. Honestly, I can sit here today and I feel so passionately about sharing it, because it's not failure. And it is also okay to be sad about it. Like you said earlier, it is grieving something you so desperately wanted.
And I think there's something in this as well, you know, like people need to understand that you can be sad for the rest of your life if that's
Of course you can.
If that's what it takes.
And you can be sad about whatever the hell you want to be sad about. Because I felt like I couldn't be sad because I had a baby, because I had Albie. And I feel like people who hadn't had a baby, I felt like, so I couldn't be sad because I should be really happy because I was able to have a baby. But it wasn't like that. You can be sad about whatever the hell you want to be. It's your emotions and it's your life. And just because I've got Monty doesn't take away from the fact that I dreamt of having that baby, because I did, ultimately. My plans were the other baby, you know. My plans were the one we lost. They're the dreams that I'd envisaged with Albie and his sibling. I dreamt that they were 4 years apart, you know. And so you can be sad about whatever the hell you want to be sad about, and for as long as you want to be sad for.
And you now sit here as a former athlete, but as a mum, as a wife. How happy are you now?
Like, so unbelievably happy. It's funny because everyone says to me, oh, do you miss it? And I don't know if I'm too close to just being out of time. Like, I'm just, obviously it's the start for me, this now, isn't it? It's been, 6-7 weeks. But all I've dreamt of for so long is to be at home with the family and the kids and to have no other worries, that at the minute, I'm so happy with how my life is panning out.
So good. And obviously your husband's been through the same thing, retiring as a professional cyclist. He's now gone back in as a coach.
Yeah.
Do you see what he's doing and think, oh, I definitely have a bit of that? Or do you see what he's doing and think, that seems like a proper job, I'm going nowhere near that?
No, I just think absolutely not. The responsibility of other people's careers, no thank you. Like, he has to have some tough meetings, you know, like they're selecting their Olympic team and he has to tell someone, well, you're not going to be in it. And yes, although they will stay on the programme, it's just, you've just ended someone's Olympic dream. I could not have that responsibility. Absolutely not. No.
Ready for some quick fire questions?
Okay, go.
The 3 non-negotiable behaviours that really matter to you.
You must have heard of the 10-minute rule, the cycling 10-minute rule.
You tell us it.
Right, well, I mean, I literally live by the 10-minute rule, and it does my nutting that Jason does not mind if we are late. But the 10-minute rule was always an Ian Dyer special, right? And it was, no matter what, whether it be a meeting, whether it be a bike ride, you have to be there 10 minutes early. Because if anything goes wrong, if your meeting room changes, if you get down to your bike and you've had a puncture, you've got 10 minutes to resolve that problem and you will still leave on time. And that has lived with me throughout. So I'd say that is one. I totally agree. Number 2, I would say respect for everyone, no matter what level of career they're in, whether that be from the academy riders that are just starting out to be speaking to your PD. Everyone deserves the same amount of respect. And I would say that the biggest thing for me was really getting to know people, my staff members, you know. I would go to Ernie and I would ask him who's our mechanic, and I would sit in there and I'd have lunch with him and I'd ask him about his kids because, not his kids, sorry, he doesn't have kids, about his mum, because I knew his mum was poorly. And it was really about getting to know these people for people. They're not civvies. They are there to work with you, not for you. And I would say that that's always been like a massive thing for me. And I mean, it sounds bad saying this, right? But as an athlete, I think selfishness is a attribute that I would say is key to success. I think putting your career before anything is key to being successful. And so as much as, yeah, you might say, well, selfishness is a funny personality trait to think. But for me, I would say that helped Jason and I be successful. The fact that we would do everything to make sure we turned up on that bike at 100%.
What advice would you give a young Laura Trott just starting out?
Well, the first thing I would say is make sure you're always enjoying it. Like, never do anything for the sake of doing it, you know? Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're enjoying it, because when you get to the 15 years or however long my career was down the line, it has to still be fun. Otherwise it becomes hard work. And the minute it becomes hard work, you don't want to do it anymore. So I would say just whatever you are doing, whether it be a training session, training camp, everything, try and make it as enjoyable as possible. And I'd also say, like, being able to voice your opinion from the get-go, because as much as we are saying, you know, I was very confident in saying things, there were times when I would sit back and go, oh, well, I would probably change that, but I'm not going to. So I would say just make sure you're always able to voice your opinion.
If you could go back to one moment in your life, where would you go and why?
Oh, I would go back to London 2012. It changed my life. Like, there's no two ways about it. It literally changed my life. Obviously, I met Jace just prior to London 2012. And then competing at a home games was just something else. Like, it was just absolutely mind-blowing. And yeah, I would relive that time and time again.
I bet.
What's the single best piece of advice you've ever received and why?
Oh, it's got to be something that my dad said. His attitude was always, it's just a bike race. That is all it is. You are riding around in circles. And so it probably is that, like, to go into these races for enjoyment, not, like, don't take anything too seriously.
Lovely. And the final question, your one golden rule that you'd like to leave people with for living a high-performance life?
Do everything for you. There is never any, you hear of so many athletes doing, like, staying in sport even, or even the sport itself, because they're felt under pressure by other people. But for me, it's always been about doing it because I want to do it. And so my rule would be, make sure it's your decisions that are getting you where you are today.
I like that. And, you know, with the conversation we've just had, look at what happened to you in the one part of your career where you didn't do something for you. The right thing for you would have been to speak, right? And to speak out, but you were unable for various reasons. So look at the impact it had. And thank you so much for sharing what you did. I mean, it's, as a parent, it's such an emotional conversation to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's an important one. I think the most important thing is for you to lay bare actually how hard it is, because we still skirt around the surface a bit, and there will be people listening to this who are in a really difficult place.
Definitely, yeah.
And they will easily think to themselves, well, what I have is so much harder than where Laura was. But you've been so clear about actually that, you know, you probably were depressed. You were suffering with your mental health, right?
Yeah, definitely.
There's no doubt about that.
No, yeah, for sure.
And for you to talk in the way that you have about it, I think is so helpful for others. It feels like that's something that you want a bit of a legacy for you now.
Definitely, yeah. Like, because it's not always, I think when you see me and you see my Instagram and whatever, you see me as a sports person, but there's always another side to our personalities. And so for me, it is so important to be able to have those discussions now.
And did you have therapy at any point?
No, I didn't, no. I mean, it really was, I think once I was able to open up and speak to Jace, because we struggle, because this is the other thing, we take for granted what you as men go through. Like, ultimately, you too live it, and you too lose children. But no one ever asks how the males are. Like, no one, because obviously it's happening to us. It was in our bodies, not yours. And we really struggled to speak to each other about it. And I think once we were able to speak to each other about it, it made a huge difference to how I was feeling and how I was thinking.
And how was he doing?
He struggled massively initially, Jace. We actually did an appearance I didn't realise how badly he was struggling until we went and did a Q&A. And it was actually with Susie Wolf, who was doing it for us, who was asking us the questions. And she asked us, because I think it must have been post me putting it on Instagram, and she asked us how we were, and Jace just burst out crying in front of 300 people in this audience. And it never occurred to me how badly he was. And then obviously afterwards, we went out the back and we were both really upset. And I was like, wow, literally, she's probably one of the first people that have actually asked Jason if he's okay. And it was mad. Like in my head, I was like, literally, you've just only ever cared about how you feel because it happened to you. But of course it happened to both of us. And so initially it was so difficult for him because he also felt like he couldn't say he wasn't okay.
Yeah.
Because I was so upset. And so it was a real, it was just a horrendous time for the pair of us.
Because there is this feeling, isn't it, that it's happened to the woman.
Yes.
Therefore the trauma is greater. Therefore, as the husband, you can't say I'm really struggling here.
No.
Yeah.
Because you feel like that's selfish. Because you as a husband, you think it's 10 times worse for you.
Yeah. And I think that is exactly how Jason felt. And he felt like I'm his go-to, as he's my go-to. And he felt like he couldn't come to me because it would just make it worse for me. But whereas actually, it really took the pair of us to open up to each other to get onto the other side, I guess, of it.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
It's all right.